"Sleep well, sweetie," said my daughter-in-law, locking my door from outside. Through the window, I watched them pour gasoline around the house. My son lit the match, smiling. Their plan: steal my $3 billion. But when they returned from their alibi dinner, I was sitting in the living room with the fire marshal. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me tell you how a woman who built a tech empire from nothing discovered that her own family considered her more valuable dead than alive. Oh, and how spectacularly wrong they were about that. 6 hours earlier, I was lying in my hospital bed, pretending to be heavily sedated, while my son Michael and his wife Lauren whispered their murder plans 3 feet away. Funny thing about being 72 and worth $3 billion, everyone assumes your hearing is shot. Mine isn't. Neither is my memory, despite what they'd been telling the doctors. "The pills aren't working fast enough," Lauren hissed. "She could live another 10 years at this rate." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "We can't just speed things up. There's security footage, nurses checking on her every hour. Then we do it at home. Tonight. Make it look like an accident." I kept my breathing steady, though my heart was racing. These two vultures had been feeding me increasing doses of digoxin for months, disguising it as heart medication. They thought I was confused, forgetful. What I actually was? Furious. See, I'd built Pinnacle Technologies from my garage in 1987. By 2010, we were worth $50 billion. I sold to Microsoft for $3 billion, keeping enough shares to live comfortably forever. Michael had always been lazy, expecting inheritance to solve his problems. Lauren was worse, a former pharmaceutical sales rep who knew exactly which medications could mimic dementia in elderly patients. "Fire would be perfect," she continued. "Old house, faulty wiring. She's been forgetting to turn off appliances lately. Actually, Lauren, I'd been documenting every single one of your attempted poisonings. But thanks for the character assessment. The drive home was surreal. Michael helped me to my bedroom with such tender concern. You'd never guess he was planning my murder. Lauren brought me tea, more digitalis, no doubt, and kissed my forehead like a devoted daughter. "We're going to dinner, Grandma Kate," she announced. "Giuseppe's. We made reservations for 7:30. Giuseppe's was 45 minutes away. They were establishing an alibi. The moment their car disappeared, I got to work. First, I called my private security company. "This is Catherine Matthews. I need fire department and police at my residence immediately. Code 7. Code 7 meant family threat, imminent danger. Then I gathered evidence. The fake medication bottles Lauren had been using. The financial documents showing Michael's gambling debts. $2 million I hadn't known about. The insurance policy they'd taken out on me 6 months ago, with them as beneficiaries. By the time I heard footsteps on the front porch 40 minutes later, I was ready. The smell hit them first. Gasoline poured liberally around the foundation while I watched from upstairs. Then they saw the smoke detectors Michael had disabled blinking red again. I'd reconnected them all. Lauren pushed open the front door, expecting to find my charred remains. Instead, she found me sitting calmly in my favorite armchair, very much alive, with Fire Marshal Robert Chen and Detective Sandra Mills flanked beside me. "Grandma Kate!" Michael exclaimed, his face a mask of relief and terror. "Thank God you're safe. We smelled smoke from the street." "How thoughtful of you to notice," I replied, "especially since you're the ones who started it." The silence that followed was delicious. You know what's better than seeing a plan backfire spectacularly? Watching the planners realize they've walked into their own trap. Lauren recovered first, because sociopaths always do. "Kate, sweetie, you're confused. We just got back from dinner. Look, we have the receipt." She fumbled in her purse with shaking hands. Fire Marshal Chen stepped forward. "Ma'am, we found accelerant poured around the entire perimeter of this house. The pattern indicates someone intended to trap whoever was inside." His voice was professional, but his eyes were hard as granite. Michael's face had gone gray. "That's impossible. Who would do such a thing?" Detective Mills consulted her notepad. According to Mrs. Matthews, she observed 2 individuals from her bedroom window at approximately 8:15 p.m. They appeared to be pouring liquid from red containers around the foundation. "But we were at Giuseppe's," Lauren insisted. "The staff will remember us." "I'm sure they will," I said pleasantly, "since you made such a point of being seen there. Tell me, How did you manage to order dinner, drive 45 minutes home, attempt to commit arson, and still have time to notice smoke from the street? You're either remarkably efficient criminals or terrible at math. Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Mom, you're not making sense. Why would we hurt you? $2 million in gambling debts might provide some motivation, Detective Mills noted, pulling out Michael's financial records, along with a recent $2 million life insurance policy on your mother. The color drained from Lauren's face. How did you get those records? I finished for her. Darling, when you're worth $3 billion, you don't just assume your family loves you for your sparkling personality. I've had investigators monitoring both of you for months. Lauren's mask finally slipped completely. You paranoid old witch? You've been spying on your own family? Lucky for me, I replied, since my own family has been trying to murder me. Fire Marshal Chen held up an evidence bag containing an empty gasoline container. We found this in the bushes by your front gate. Fresh fingerprints on the handle. Michael stared at the container like it might bite him. Lauren, however, was calculating. I could practically see her scrambling for a new strategy. This is all a misunderstanding, she said suddenly. Kate's been having episodes, paranoid delusions. We've been trying to get her medical care, but she refuses treatment. Medical care like the digitalis you've been slipping into my tea? I asked conversationally. The room went dead silent. Lauren's eyes widened in shock before narrowing with rage. Detective Mills leaned forward. Ma'am, are you saying you've been poisoned? Systematically, for approximately 4 months, I confirmed. I have hair samples, blood work, and video surveillance showing Lauren adding medication to my food and beverages. Michael found his voice. Mom, that's insane. Lauren's been taking care of you. The medication is for your heart condition. What heart condition would that be, Michael? I've never had heart problems in my life. But digitalis poisoning mimics dementia symptoms beautifully, doesn't it, Lauren? Lauren's silence was answer enough. Detective Mills stood up. Mr. and Mrs. Matthews, I'm going to need you both to come with me for questioning. This is ridiculous, Michael protested. She's a senile old woman making up stories. That's when I smiled my sweetest grandmother smile. Oh, honey, there's nothing senile about $3 billion and a very detailed will that, as of this morning, no longer includes either of you. The next morning brought reporters to my front door like vultures to roadkill. Billionaire tech pioneer survives murder plot. Family greed turns deadly. Silicon Valley grandmother outsmarts killers. I made coffee and watched the circus from my kitchen window. 30 years of carefully guarded privacy, gone overnight. But frankly, I'd rather be a living headline than a dead footnote. My attorney, James Harrison, arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, looking like he'd aged 5 years since yesterday. Kate, this is a legal nightmare. The media attention alone could complicate everything. Good, I said, pouring him coffee in my favorite mug, the one that says, World's Most Dangerous Grandmother. I want Michael and Lauren to know exactly what they've lost. The police are charging them with attempted murder, arson, and conspiracy. Lauren's also facing charges for drug trafficking. Apparently, the digitalis she used requires a prescription. She stole it from her old pharmaceutical contacts, I explained. I had my investigators trace the serial numbers. Very sloppy for someone who thought she was so clever. James shook his head. Kate, they're your son and daughter-in-law. Are you certain you want to pursue this to the full extent? I set down my coffee cup harder than necessary. James, they tried to burn me alive. They've been slowly poisoning me for months. Exactly how much family loyalty should I show to people who see me as a walking dollar sign? I understand your anger, but consider the implications. Michael is your only child. If he goes to prison, then maybe he should have considered that before trying to murder his mother for money. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Mills. Lab confirms digitalis in all food samples. Video evidence admissible. Case is solid. James, I said, showing him the message. I didn't survive the tech industry by being sentimental. I survived by being smarter than the people trying to destroy me. There was a knock at the front door. Through the window, I could see my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, holding what looked like a casserole dish. Behind her stood 3 other neighbors, all with concerned expressions and covered dishes. Kate, dear, Mrs. Rodriguez said when I opened the door. We heard about the terrible incident. We brought food. Within minutes, My kitchen was full of neighbors I'd barely spoken to in 15 years. They'd all seen the news, of course, but more importantly, they'd all had their suspicions about Michael and Lauren. "That boy never visited unless he needed something," observed Mr. Patterson from 2 houses down. "And that wife of his?" He shook his head disapprovingly. "Always asking questions about your business," added Mrs. Chen. "Last month she wanted to know if you'd mentioned updating your will. It was fascinating, really. My neighbors had been watching my potential murder unfold in real time, recognizing the warning signs I'd been too close to see clearly." "Mrs. Matthews," said young Sarah from next door, "I recorded some of their arguments. They were loud enough to hear through the walls. Should I give the recordings to the police?" 20 minutes later, Detective Mills arrived to collect what amounted to a neighborhood's worth of evidence against Michael and Lauren. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd been documenting their behavior. As the neighbors finally left with promises to check on me daily, I found myself feeling something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for surviving, I'd never doubted I would, but for discovering I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. My phone rang. James, calling from his office. "Kate, I have news. Michael and Lauren's bail hearing is tomorrow. The prosecutor is asking for $2 million each." "Perfect," I said. "They don't have $2 million. That's why they tried to kill me in the first place." "Kate," his voice held a warning note. "James, I want you to attend that hearing. I want you to look my son in the eye and tell him that his mother, the woman he tried to murder, hopes he enjoys his time in jail to think about what family really means." The bail hearing was a masterclass in cosmic justice. I sat in the front row, wearing my best navy suit and the pearl necklace Michael's father had given me for our anniversary. If my son was going to see his mother for possibly the last time, I wanted him to remember exactly what he'd thrown away. Michael looked terrible. Orange jumpsuit, hollow eyes, hands shaking slightly from what the jail doctor had diagnosed as withdrawal. Apparently his gambling addiction had expanded to include cocaine. Lauren sat beside him, her usual polished appearance replaced by the harsh reality of county detention center beauty standards. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Patricia Valdez, laid out the case with surgical precision. "Your Honor, these defendants systematically poisoned an elderly woman for 4 months, then attempted to burn her alive to cover their tracks and collect insurance money. Michael's public defender, a tired-looking man who clearly drew the short straw, attempted a weak defense about family misunderstandings and stress-related poor judgment. Lauren's attorney, expensive, private, tried to paint her as a devoted daughter-in-law, driven to desperation by my alleged mental deterioration. That's when Judge Patricia Williams asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Mrs. Matthews, you're present in court today. Would you like to make a statement regarding bail for the defendants?" I stood slowly, using the cane I didn't actually need for maximum dramatic effect. "Your Honor, I spent 40 years building a technology company from nothing. I employed 3,000 people, paid millions in taxes, and donated over $50 million to various charities. I did this as a single mother after my husband died when Michael was 12. The courtroom was silent, except for the whisper of the court reporter's fingers on her machine. I loved my son unconditionally. I paid for his education, his wedding, his house, his car. When he developed a gambling problem, I paid those debts too, hoping he'd learn from his mistakes. I turned to look directly at Michael, who couldn't meet my eyes. When he married Lauren, I welcomed her like the daughter I'd never had. I trusted her with my health. My home, my life." My voice hardened. "They repaid that love by trying to murder me for money they were too lazy to earn. Your Honor, these people saw a 72-year-old woman and thought she'd be easy prey. They were wrong." I sat down to absolute silence. Judge Williams reviewed her notes for what felt like 10 minutes. "Bail is set at $5 million each," she announced finally. "These defendants attempted to murder a vulnerable elderly person for financial gain. They pose a clear danger to the victim and the community. $5 million. Even if they'd managed to steal my money, they couldn't have afforded that." As court security led them away, Lauren turned and mouthed something at me that looked distinctly like a threat. Michael, on the other hand, was crying. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like angry bees. "Mrs. Matthews, how do you feel seeing your son arrested?" "Relieved," I answered honestly. For months, I thought I was losing my mind. Turns out I was just being murdered. There's actually something comforting about knowing the difference. Will you visit them in jail? I paused, considering the question seriously. I spent 72 years being the kind of woman who forgave everything and forgot nothing. It nearly got me killed. I think it's time to try being the kind of woman who remembers everything and forgives nothing. That quote made every evening newscast in the country. But the real satisfaction came 3 hours later when James called with an update. Kate, I have interesting news. Apparently, Michael's cellmate is a gentleman named Rodriguez who was convicted of killing his mother for insurance money. How poetic, I murmured. Rodriguez has already explained to Michael exactly what happens to people who murder their mothers. In very colorful terms, I'm told. I smiled for the first time in months. James, I think I'm going to sleep very well tonight. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the empty shell of what had been Michael's house, watching the moving company load my belongings into trucks. The bank had foreclosed when his gambling debts came to light. Apparently, my son had been more creative with other people's money than I'd realized. Mrs. Matthews? The moving foreman approached hesitantly. We found this in a bedroom safe. He handed me a manila envelope marked insurance policies. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Not just the policy on my life, but additional policies on my property, my car, even my jewelry. Lauren had been quite thorough in her planning, but there was something else, a handwritten letter in Michael's scrawl. Lauren, I can't do this anymore. She's my mother. Find another way. M. Dated 2 days before their arrest. So my son had grown a conscience at the last minute. How touching. Too bad it was approximately 4 months too late. My phone rang. Detective Mills. Mrs. Matthews, we've had a development. Lauren's agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Cooperate how? She's claiming Michael was the mastermind. Says she was coerced, afraid for her own safety if she didn't go along with his plan. I laughed, surprising myself with how bitter it sounded. Of course she is. Lauren's always been smarter than Michael. She's probably figured out which one of them is more likely to get the death penalty. There's more. She's also claiming you've been mentally abusive for years, that Michael felt trapped by your financial control. Financial control? I could feel my blood pressure rising. I paid for everything in their lives without asking for anything in return. Exactly what control was I exerting? According to her statement, you held money over their heads, threatened to cut them off whenever they disagreed with you, made them feel worthless. The audacity was breathtaking. Detective Mills, I have 30 years of bank records showing every gift, every payment, every bailout I provided to my son. Find me one instance where I demanded anything in return. That's actually why I'm calling. The prosecutor wants to meet with you. Lauren's defense strategy is shifting to paint you as a manipulative matriarch who drove your family to desperation. When? Tomorrow at 9 a.m. After hanging up, I stood in Michael's former house, surrounded by the detritus of his failed life, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months, uncertainty. Not about my innocence, that was absolute, but about whether a jury would see things the same way. How easy would it be to paint a wealthy, childless widow as controlling? How simple to convince people that $3 billion came with strings attached. I walked through the master bedroom where Lauren had carefully planned my death. In the attached bathroom, I found prescription bottles she'd apparently missed when fleeing. All heart medications, all with my name on them, all containing digitalis, according to the labels. But here's what Lauren didn't know about being a successful businesswoman. You always keep detailed records. Every transaction, every conversation, every decision. I pulled out my phone and called James. I need you to access my private files. Security code 7749. There's a folder marked Family Financial History. Bring everything to the prosecutor's office tomorrow. Kate, what are we talking about here? 30 years of documentation showing every penny I ever gave Michael, every conversation about money, every time I bailed him out of trouble. If Lauren wants to play the victim, let's show the jury exactly what kind of victim tries to burn her benefactor alive. How extensive are these records? I smiled, thinking of my decades in the tech industry where documentation could make or break a company. James, I didn't become a billionaire by trusting people's memories. I have everything. That night, I sat in my new temporary apartment, a penthouse suite downtown with security that would make the White House jealous, and reviewed 30 years of being the mother I thought I should be. Bank statements showing Michael's college tuition, $180,000. His wedding, $75,000. 3 cars, $95,000. Credit card debt paid 5 separate times, $340,000. Gambling debts, $2,100,000. Total given to my son in his adult life, $2,190,000. Total requests for repayment, 0. Total expressions of gratitude. I'd need Lauren's cooperation to count that low. The prosecutor's office felt like a battleground, and I was ready for war. Patricia Valdez had spread my documentation across every available surface. Bank statements, receipts, recorded phone calls, even photographs from family gatherings with timestamps showing Michael's various expensive gifts. "Mrs. Matthews," she said, reviewing a particularly damning bank transfer, "this is remarkable. You've documented every financial interaction with your son for 30 years. In my business, you learn that people's memories become very selective when money is involved. I preferred facts